Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us. It's great to have everybody together again for another webinar in our global webinar series. This afternoon, we are thrilled to have joining us Heather Lee, who's coming to us from Colorado. And her topic today is aging, saging, and psilocybin. And so for those who've joined our webinars before, as you know, I'm just going to share a few brief slides, give a brief introduction and overview of My Medicine Australia and the work that we do for those who are new to us. And then I will introduce Heather and we'll get into today's topic. And so just to begin with a brief disclaimer and a reminder, our focus is on the development and use of evidence-based psychedelic-assisted therapies within regulated healthcare systems. We don't encourage the use of psychedelic medicines out of this context, and we do not support the use of these substances in any way that's unlawful. Our presentations are intended for educational purposes only. They do not constitute medical advice. Individuals should discuss their individual health needs with their healthcare providers. And these sessions are recorded and they'll be shared. This will be shared on our YouTube channel. It will go up tomorrow. So, as a very brief introduction to our organization, the purpose of My Medicine Australia is, it was founded in 2018. It's in response to the mental health crisis, and I don't feel that it's overblown to use that word that we're seeing with the challenges with mental health in Australia and around the world at this current time. And as a part of this, we've seen a real lack of treatment innovation, certainly within evidence-based therapies for mental illness for 50 years. The reason that we're founded was to help alleviate the suffering and the suicides caused by the mental illness in Australia. And it's with a focus on expanding the treatment options that are available to medical practitioners and to their patients. And our focus on this is by looking at psychedelic-assisted therapies and looking at them to treat a range of mental illnesses in the clinical settings. We are a charity, and our focus is we look at it from a whole of system. So in the simplest way of putting it, we've been looking at this for the last 6 years now, saying what's needed to move this forward. And our key focus on this has been on psilocybin and MDMA, psilocybin obviously being the medicine we're talking about today, as these are the two psychedelic medicines that have the most significant evidence base to support their use, their clinical use at this stage, although many others have research behind them as well. And then also ketamine, which is obviously the psychedelic medicine, which is a little bit of a different medicine, but has regulatory approval in Australia, even though that is mostly used as an anesthetic. Our indications of success are that psychedelic therapies become an integral part of our mental health system, that they achieve high remission rates, leading to a substantial improvement in our mental health statistics and the function of our mental health system, and that they are both accessible and affordable to all Australians who could need them. So that's a very high-level overview of our organisation. On this next slide here that I've shared, this is a very brief overview of what a psychedelic-assisted therapy protocol looks like, and I'm not going to speak to this in much depth, but just to give, for those who are really new to this space, just a visual to look at what happens and what it looks like. There is a screening and assessment process that work is done by a medical professional of determining whether someone's appropriate. Then the patient is prepared. Then they go through dosing with the psychedelic medicine, and then there's a period of therapy to integrate that experience. And then if there's another dosing session to be done, then the preparation, medication integration repeats. This is all within a therapeutic container designed to create safety and establish set and setting. This image is taken from the paper that I've listed as a reference below, which has a great overview and introduction to psychedelic-assisted therapy for anyone new to the space. So back to My Medicine Australia, we have 4 strategic pillars that we work to. The first is awareness and knowledge building. The second is our professional development program. The third is supporting research into psychedelic medicines. And then the fourth is supporting patient access. And you can see a couple of bullet points. There's a couple of things under each one of these that we work to. And I will just give a very brief summary of some of our key achievements in all 4 of these areas. So to begin with patient access, this is this is the most important achievement of our work was the advocacy that we did that allowed MDMA and psilocybin to be successfully rescheduled in Australia. It made Australia the first country in the world to recognise them as medicines rather than having them classified as a poison, as they are on the international poison standard, and has allowed for clinical access in Australia, really with Australia being one of a small number of jurisdictions that has a functional program. Colorado, where Heather is, being somewhere else that has one, even though it's slightly in a slightly different, not so much of a exactly medical system setting. We've secured access to the medicines themselves, which enables pharmaceutical grade psilocybin MDMA to be accessed by doctors who are working with it at affordable prices. And then we also have a patient support fund, which subsidizes treatment, making it more accessible and affordable for those who otherwise couldn't afford it. For awareness and knowledge building, we hosted back in 2021 the International Summit for Psychedelic Assisted Therapies. It's the largest event of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere at the time. We run events such as this, and we've also supported grassroots volunteer groups around Australia to support the advocacy campaigns. Our professional development program is built around our certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies. I'll speak to this just for a moment more in a moment, but we're getting to 500 practitioners who've been through the training now, and this is the training that is the type of training that's required to enter the psychedelic field in Australia. It's a 4-month training. And then we also have an introductory fundamentals of psychedelic assisted therapy, which is an online 6-week program, which we recommend for those who aren't quite ready to train, but would like to go deeper than you can in 1-hour sessions such as this. And then in the research area, we've been successful in supporting a number of innovative trials. There was a $15 million government from the grant from the Australian government. That one came from the Morrison government, actually. And that was split between 7 different trials at universities around Australia to support psychedelic research. That came off our advocacy. We've also funded a number of different trials. Central to this is a registry that's being used to collect outcome data from the treatment happening in Australia, so we can collect real world evidence and see how well these treatments work out in clinical settings. And so this is a quick brief slide that just has a number of the headlines that came about, where, as I mentioned, this achievement of ours from 2023, when the advocacy work that we did to support the rescheduling of psilocybin MDMA was successful. And it was really a surprise to many that Australia would take this decision and become a leading organization in the world, leading country, I should say, sorry, in this field. And something that we've seen from this is it's been a great opportunity, but also there's responsibility for all of us working in this space in Australia to make sure that it's done in a way that it is safe and also supports people to have positive outcomes. And so this slide here, which is getting towards the end of my introduction, just gives a very brief overview of where this program is at. It took, as any new regulatory scheme does, a little while to get started, but we're now seeing patients regularly going through treatment. It's over 100 patients now. The number of authorized prescribers is getting closer to 30. And as you can see, there's clinics that are starting to deliver psychedelic treatment all around Australia with a number of other cities and towns. It's great to see regional areas getting started as well. And we're also seeing funding starting to become available. So as I mentioned, the patient support fund that we have has funded $100,000 worth of treatment at this point, but also the DVA has announced support for veterans, and we're expecting it to begin very soon. Medibank Private is also announced a pilot program, including a research layer, and HAF is another funder, and then there's other funding options that are starting to appear. So these are all the pieces coming into place for a really functional psychedelic field within Australia. And so I will just move quickly through these maps, but these ones just put on a map those locations that you saw listed on that previous slide. And so as a couple of last slides, and I just want to fly through these so I can hand over to Heather, of what are the options for those who see this today and would like to get more involved with the psychedelic space in Australia. To begin with, for any clinicians, as I mentioned earlier, our certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies is like a gateway into working in the space. It's a 4-month training. It's part-time online for the most part, with 1 week in person towards the end. There's a quote from Professor David Nutt down here, who works on a lot of different trainings around the world, and we're very proud to be able to say that he's shared in a few different contexts that he feels this is the best one that he works on. And this is a program that we're really thrilled and pleased with the offering. Its next intake begins in July, and our application deadline is coming up just at the end of this week. And just to this slide, and then the next one as well, for those who've been following the psychedelic space for a while, will recognize many of these faces and many of these names. And one of the central things of this training is it really is an opportunity and a unique opportunity to learn from some of the best and most well-regarded people in this space in the world. And this isn't an opportunity that you get often, to really learn from those who've led the way and paved the way in a space such as this. So that's a mentioning of the faculty. I've got a couple of, we've got some logos here of just bodies that have accredited and endorsed the program, which is great to see. When we first started, getting accreditation and endorsement from professional bodies was difficult because everyone said the space, it was too early and it was too emerging. But now this is coming on board, and we're seeing more organizations and professional bodies just clearly putting their stamp of approval on a really high quality training. And then the program itself is moving into hands-on training. And this is something that we're currently developing, and we're expecting these programs to be beginning later this year. And then this is a couple of clinics that will be opening their doors later this year that will be integrating with these hands-on training opportunities. And this, from my perspective, is the one managing the training. I'm really pleased to see that the field is getting to a place of maturity that allows for people to finish and then go in and get this hands-on experience in clinical settings that are getting up and running. So as I said, the next intake begins in July. The application is the end of this week. So if you are interested, please go to the website that's listed here, cpat.mindmedicineaustralia.org, to jump on and apply and sign up. And there is a code you can use for a reduction on the application fee. Finally, I'm going to fly through these. As I mentioned, we have an introductory 6-week course. For those who'd like to learn more, please jump on and go to the URL here, and you can learn more about this one. This is a fantastic introduction for anyone who wants to start learning more. And if you are of means and you wish to support people, please do consider making a donation. There's 2 ways to donate. One is straight into our patient support fund, 100% of proceeds, and this will go straight to subsidizing treatment for a patient who otherwise could not afford it. So it's an amazing way to support somebody to make a real difference in their life, someone who's really suffering. And we do also accept general donations that go towards all of our programs, and this may be around the various different areas I've spoken to. So please consider going to these areas for this. And then finally, we have one other deadline approaching, which is coming up next Wednesday. We have worked with the Palliative Care Psychedelic Assisted Therapy Coalition on the NWISE initiative, which you'll see here. And this is an application that will expand the use of psilocybin in Australia so that those approaching end of life and suffering from existential distress can receive access to this treatment. This link at the bottom, nwise.au/get-involved, has the information. You can make a public submission to support this between now and next Wednesday. This is a really important part of the TGA's regulatory process. At the end of the day, the TGA is here to serve the public, and if the public is in support of an initiative like this, it's much more likely to be approved. So please do, anyone who's interested in this space, go to this website, read the instructions, read how it works, make a submission, and share this with your friends. The more support we can get for this, then the more likely that people who are getting towards the end of their life will be able to receive access to these treatments. And finally, that's a list of some more webinars. Apologies, I didn't remove today's and the last month's session, but there's a number of more great webinars coming up over the rest of this month. And so I will stop sharing my slides there. And I would like to pass over and introduce now today's speaker, which is Heather Lee. And the timing of this session couldn't be better with this end of life application coming up. To have Heather joining us is truly wonderful. She is, as I mentioned, based in Colorado, which is one of a small number of areas where one can work functionally and legally in a regulated setting with psilocybin. And she specializes in working with clients who are in their 60s and over. And so she's working a lot with people as they are transitioning towards the later stages of their life. She also specializes in women's work. So I don't feel, in the light of this application that I mentioned, we could have a better speaker than Heather to be joining us today. So Heather, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. So I see my screen share up. Is that what you all see too?
We got it.
Excellent. Good. Well, it's truly an honor to be here. I mean, Mind Medicine Australia is doing such wonderful work, and so I just support wholeheartedly all of the programs and fundraising and education they're doing. And it's so important. Things like my talk, all the talks, this is such a new field. So speaking to the community, to people, getting the word out there, what this really is to help destigmatize and really increase awareness is so important. So I love to do talks like this. And so my talk this evening, well, it's evening for me. I think it's midday for you all, but a little bit of sort of background on me. I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I've been a mental health therapist for over 30 years. And I am one of the first, I graduated in the very first cohort of a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist training here in Colorado and in the US. And upon completing that, about 3 years ago now, I then went to Jamaica and spent 4 months leading back-to-back psilocybin retreats in Jamaica. So at this point, I've probably journeyed well over 400 clients on psilocybin experiences. So I am really an incredible, believer in the power of this medicine because I've witnessed so many ways that it helps people heal. And part of my background also, I spent several years working as a mental health specialist in end of life for hospice and palliative organizations. So it's very near and dear to my heart to bring these medicines to end of life and aging and existential distress. So my talk is aging, saging, and psilocybin. Now I had this sign up at somewhere else. I was doing this talk and a guy walked by and said, aging, sagging, and psilocybin. No, it is not sagging. We are talking about saging. We're talking about moving into the age of our wisdom, even if there is a little sagging going on with that. So some of the things I'm going to try to touch on today are the exploration of the role that psilocybin can play in supporting healthy aging neurologically, emotionally, and spiritually. So this is me in the bottom here. I was fortunate enough, I don't know if any of you that are in the States maybe saw, but Lisa Ling of CBS News came to Colorado and she was doing a 3-part series on the psychedelic renaissance. And she called me and she said, Heather, I've heard about your work and I want to come and film some of the, one of the retreats, some of the work you're doing. And I said, well, that's great, Lisa, come to Colorado. I'll throw some people together. We'll put together a retreat. And the next day, and this is when you start working in the psychedelic space, things happen that don't feel coincidental. They feel like they're aligned. I got a call from the woman in the top there sitting with the pinkish red shirt on. And she said, Heather, I've been wanting to do psilocybin because my youngest daughter has extreme anxiety. And well, when I was talking to her about doing it, she said she'd feel safer if I did it with her. And then my other daughter said she wanted to do it. And well, then my mother said she wanted to do it. So I did a intergenerational retreat with a grandmother, a mother, and 2 daughters, all doing psilocybin together at the same time in the same house. And the other gal in this picture is this Native American gal who wanted to do the retreat as well. So we're doing this retreat that's intergenerational, it's ancestral healing, and Lisa Ling of CBS News happened to be there filming the whole thing, and it turned out to be a really fabulous experience. It's on my website if you all want to see it. But, it was really a beautiful experience to do this medicine with 3 generations and and for the grandmother to be there supporting her granddaughters. And that really ignited my passion for the use of this medicine cross-generationally. And I often now on a lot of my retreats have mothers and daughters. And as Scott said in the beginning, almost all my retreats and the work I do is with women that are 60 and above. I like to say they're midlife retreats, but people always say to me, I'm 62. And I say, well, they're for people like me. They're like midlife retreats. And people go, Heather, how old do you think you're going to live to be? Like you're a little older than midlife, but not in my mind. Anyway, so some of the benefits of psilocybin, when we think about psilocybin for aging and the process of our aging brains and minds and spirits, psilocybin offers neuroprotective benefits. So psilocybin, when it stimulates neuroplasticity, it stimulates the ability of our brain to rewire and heal. right? It increases that BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So that's the protein that helps us build our synapses. So we're literally, there's physiologically these neuroprotective benefits of healing our brains, building new neural connections. And also, research is finding there's a reduction in the inflammation and neuroinflammation in our brains. Well, that neuroinflammation is what causes a lot of neurodegenerative diseases. So this slide alone, speaks volumes to the fact that psilocybin has these benefits, these actual physiological benefits for our brain function and health that are really, really beneficial to healthy aging of our brains and of our cognitive function. So as we age, the research is showing that psilocybin increases our cognitive flexibility. This is our ability to adapt to change, adapt to change, to adapt and have new thought and new behaviors and get us out of that default mode network. So when you think about, that flexibility, that cognitive flexibility is really the opposite of cognitive rigidity. And think about older people. You get your default mode network gets even more and more ingrained, and it gets harder and harder to adapt to change. And what we know is, the only constant in life is what? Change, right? That's the only constant. So it's really having that flexibility is so important. And that means with the increased cognitive flexibility, that means we have increased emotional flexibility and enhanced resilience. And resilience is my absolute favorite human quality. Resilience is the ability to adapt to change, to bounce back from difficulties. And as we age, it's so important with our changes in health, losing loved ones, having to have, move, having changes in financial situations, changes in our physical capacity. All of those things take a toll on how we carry ourselves, how we feel. So that cognitive flexibility, that enhanced emotional flexibility, all helps us with our emotional resilience as well. And they're finding, a lot of the research is finding that having that flexibility, that cognitive flexibility, also delays Alzheimer's and dementia. So this cognitive enhancement of cognitive function can delay Alzheimer's and dementia, but it's also good for midlife brain fog, right? I mean, all my friends who are feeling midlife are like, God, I'm just not as sharp as I used to be. Well, psilocybin can really enhance with that. Can also enhance, I'm seeing some clients who are having issues post-COVID where they're feeling like they've got that brain fog and they're doing microdosing protocols with me and they're feeling like that's really helping. There's more and more research going on how this can also help with people that have had traumatic brain injuries. So there's just more and more research going on really showing how this not only helps with our cognitive function, but with the physiology of our brain health. So it's really exciting and it really speaks to the aging process. So I have to put a picture of Frankie and Grace. I don't know those of you, I hope many of you know that show because it's just brilliant. But the emotional benefits too that we're finding with psilocybin with older folks, again, seniors, people over 60, over 50, whatever you want to call, folks that fit this demographic. We know that this can reduce depression and anxiety, which again increases resilience. And depression, we know depression has effects on brain function and cognitive function. So all of these things sort of go hand in hand, whether you start, what came first, the chicken or the egg, whether you're, treating the depression or you're enhancing the cognitive flexibility and emotional flexibility. The bottom line is there are emotional benefits in this medicine with seniors as well. And the psychosocial benefits, we don't want to overlook that. Psilocybin experiences give you an enhanced sense of meaning and purpose and interconnectedness. One of the side effects of psilocybin is that feeling of, this intense sort of embodied feeling of interconnectedness to others, to the community, to the society as a whole. And, so many seniors suffer from isolation and feelings of not having purpose. So there's a beautiful role that this medicine can play in that area as well, and decreasing that fear of aging and end of life. So many of the research studies show that people that do psilocybin, when you have cancer or when you have, are near end of life and there's that existential distress, people report experiences where they feel like they get a greater sense of being so much more than just this body, or so much more than, just this one sort of perspective of what life is. So that decrease in that existential angst can be of such an incredible benefit. And as I said, I used to work in hospice, and I just completed a documentary that was working with 3 women with cancer and leading all of them on a psilocybin experience. And for all of these women, they came away with a sense of a different perspective on their dis-ease, on what that disease in their bodies and in their lives meant. So I think it's really important not to overlook some of these, that connection is medicine, right? That sometimes doing this medicine, just even being in that safe container, there's a benefit there as well. So to the spiritual and existential, you know, um, psilocybin journeys ignite a sense of wonder and awe and a connection to something beyond ourselves. And that it invites us, psilocybin kind of invites us into the mystery and the magic of what is so much more than what we can see and touch and feel that's just right here. And if, what is the biggest adventure we go on is probably into the great beyond when we leave this world. So there's this ability sort of to change the conversation, I think, with psilocybin and women have, or people having these experiences, because when we start looking at our spirituality and these existential conversations in the light of having these experiences, these really non-ordinary and mystical experiences with plant medicine, it invites the conversation to be more about just death and dying. It becomes about, well, what is the what's next? What are our souls? And to me, that's really exciting to be able to use these medicines and the sort of new perspective on what is existential distress and what is our spirit and our soul. I think this medicine invites that conversation back to the table in a way that can be really helpful. When I was thinking about that, I was thinking about, cross-cultural perspectives and use of plant medicines in elders and in older folks and communities. And in the Mazatec traditions, it's the elders, and this would be, some of the folks in Mexico. The elders are the guides of the ceremonies. The elders have a generational relationship with mushrooms and with the medicine. And so it's the elders who are the keeper of these wisdoms in so many cultures. And then even in ancient Greece and the Eleusinian, I'm pronouncing that right, mysteries, very likely involved consuming of a psychedelic brew. And these were yearly secret ceremonies. But again, that had a lot to do with elders and elder wisdom and ancient wisdom and ancestral wisdom. These are words you hear a lot in the psychedelic space. And that, ancestrals and elders and wise ones, I mean, there's a place with this medicine that really feels like it so naturally belongs in the space of aging. In Native American traditions, again, it's the indigenous elders that really have a connection to these spirit medicines and are the keepers of these deep traditions and pass them on. I recently went to Mexico and did a peyote ceremony with a traditional elder who had his young grandson there who he was teaching and passing the tradition on and down to. So, as I think about sort of the psychedelic renaissance, and we tend to sort of, in some ways, you think back to the 60s and the hippies, and this is a youth culture thing, and even a lot of the, new up and coming like psychedelic assisted psychotherapists. So often in the trainings that I'm in, it's people that are like so much younger than me. I mean, I'm 62, and a lot of the times it's just people in their 30s, their 20s, their 30s. But it feels so important that there be elder wisdom, not only coming into the space, but bringing the medicines to elders in our community and having this medicine be in the conversation of aging. Whoops, somebody is maybe took off their, oh no, it's my thing. That's me. Never mind. I don't know why the wrong slide is. There we go. Real quick. So I think oops.
Heather, just I don't think the sound on the video came through, so you might just need,
Oh, okay. It's
which is a
coming through
shame.
on mine. Can you, is this slide up right now? Modalities? Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you what that next one says when we get to it really quickly. But I think some of them, so you're not hearing that lady talk right now over me? There we go, she stopped. So when I think about some of the modalities for older folks and how do we, when we talk about this medicine, okay? So again, we're, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So I work, again, I'm in Colorado where have the lovely opportunity to work with clients with this medicine. And I do that through retreats and I do that through private one-on-one sessions with folks. So let me just talk really quickly about some of the retreat model. So the retreat model is so beautiful because there's so much power in people supporting each other. Again, I'll just speak to what I do, which is women supporting each other. So the retreats that I run are all women, usually 50 and over, quite often 60 and over. And so that's a beautiful, like little niche and demographic to serve because the women who find my retreats are so excited that they get to go on a retreat where it's not a bunch of hippie chicks. I got nothing against hippie chicks. I used to be a hippie chick, but they now want to go on a retreat where they're not going to have to sleep in a teepee. They're going to be in comfortable surrounding, they're going to be with people that look like them and that are, so it's really a beautiful thing to serve that demographic because we're having similar issues about aging, issues about losing a spouse, issues about aging parents or empty nesting, changing health, changing bodies, shifting, so many tectonic plates shifting in women's lives as they move into the next chapter of becoming the sage. So it's so beautiful to run retreats just with women that are, or that could be men, but that are in that age demographic. So I am a big fan of that, and because also it's creating community and connection, and that is medicine unto itself. Just like the mushrooms are medicine, there's this medicine in being seen and being held and being in a container with other women and sharing your stories and being seen and witnessed and supported. Another modality that I love for older adults is microdosing. And, we're just starting to have research on microdosing. There's not tons and tons of research, but what there is really, and whether it's antidotal or not, people really report feeling that it is incredibly beneficial. And back to my earlier slides on the, generative and cognitive and benefits, there's no downside to microdosing in my book. I mean, psilocybin is safer than anything in your bar or medicine cabinet. Like that is a fact, barring a few contraindications, such as, psychosis, bipolar, certain medications. But for the most part, I can honestly say it's safer than anything in your bar or medicine cabinet. So microdosing is taking a sub-perceptual amount of psilocybin, and I'm going to say that again, sub-perceptual, because there is so much misinformation out there about microdosing. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, oh, like I'm microdosing and I just feel so like it's, and things were like, the colors were so great. I'm like, you're not microdosing if you're having altered perception. Microdosing should give you enhanced awareness, not altered perception. So it's like maybe about 1/10 of a gram. It's a very small amount, but it's still hitting on your serotonin receptors and giving you that boost of neuroplasticity, which, as we know, is so good for your brain health, brain function. So just like people take vitamins, I am a big believer that everybody should be microdosing for their just cognitive function and brain health. A little lion's mane, a little turkey tail. There's so many mushrooms that are so good for us. And I put microdosing psilocybin in there, and I would love to see geriatricians and physicians writing scripts for everybody over 60 to please be microdosing. Again, I'm in Colorado where we can do all this stuff. And then psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So that is the lovely modality that, the Mind Medicine Australia has beautiful training. I did a training. Therapists are becoming, skilled and versed in this. And that is a session where, clients come, they consume the psilocybin, perhaps as a tea, perhaps as a capsule. You're behind eye shades and with music, and on this inner journey, accessing your inner wisdom in a really safe and supported environment. And that journey is anywhere, 4 to 6 hours, supported by a really highly skilled and trained psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. And for older folks, that can be such a powerful journey to elicit and bring up perhaps things you've been carrying your whole life that you can now look at and release and not have to carry into this next chapter. You can help bring closure to things. You can help release traumas, as well as all of the things we spoke about, enhancing your brain health and cognitive function and building new neural pathways. But, I think it's a lovely space, again, for people to focus in on, therapists to focus in on doing psychedelic assisted therapy, specifically with an older population, to having that be your niche, as like I've made that sort of my niche market, to really work with folks looking at those issues about aging, about grieving loved ones, about approaching and moving towards your own end of life, about looking at what is your purpose in this next, section of your life. So I think there's some really specific issues that can be brought to the table with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for older folks. And then in the palliative and hospice space. So as Scott had mentioned, there's a lovely initiative right now trying to really advance psilocybin for palliative and end-of-life care. And I am just a huge proponent of that. And I think there's so much incredible research showing how it really can alleviate that existential angst. And I think that folks that have a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, it seems, I will say, inhumane to deny them access to a plant medicine that could ease their suffering, that could even, give you a different way to walk the walk of moving towards your end of life. I mean, why wouldn't we want to bring a new perspective and a new way to navigate that? I mean, right now, in most of our Western cultures, we have such awful ways of sort of approaching death and dying. I mean, even the language of, losing your battle to cancer. I mean, it's all so damn negative, so again, the psychedelics with the end of life brings this opportunity to reframe it in a more spiritual way, which also just gives people at end of life a sense of power and control. Here's something that I can do, that is for me, that enhances my sense of control and my spiritual and emotional wellness as I enter the end of life. So please support the initiatives that they have going, because that's really a beautiful space for this medicine, and everyone should have easy access. So I guess you guys can't hear her, right? So what she's saying, oh, that's too bad. Well, I will tell you exactly what she's saying. You can see it on the sides there. I'll wait till it's done playing to me. So I recently did a retreat, and this lovely woman from Chicago called me, and anybody who does I would do any work with, there's a medical screening, and Scott mentioned that. And anybody who's a really, ethical clinician in this space, there should be a good screening, a medical screening, so that you know what meds people are on, people's psych background, so that you can really do this. And there should be prep, and there should be integration. It is a whole container of services supporting somebody in doing this medicine. So this lovely lady called me from Chicago because she had seen a retreat that I was running. And she called me and she said, this is literally what she said. She said, honey, I'm 82 years old and I have been a card-carrying bohemian my whole life, but I've never done the psychedelics, but I'm feeling ready and I feel like you're the person I want to do it with. So I'm going to come to your retreat. She screened appropriately. I said, fabulous, come to my retreat. So she had this, she did 4 grams of psilocybin, had a big macro journey where she reviewed, she had like 5 husbands, and her journey was like a life review of all these men that she had spent her life with. But for her, it really brought clarity to all these different parts of herself that she found and lost in these different relationships. And she really came out of it just feeling like, God, I can really go into this last chapter as a strong woman, independent, alone. I see why I've had all these relationships and why I've outlived all these husbands, but I'm feeling so grounded and I see all the gifts they've given me. So for her, it was like this life review of these relationships. But this is her quotes here. She said to me in this little video that unfortunately you couldn't hear, she said, "Oh, honey, you're never too old for a psychedelic journey. It's all about your soul, and your soul is the immortal part." What a beautiful testament to elders doing this medicine. It's about your soul, and that's the immortal part. Beautiful, right? So I like to think that, doing so the psilocybin retreats that I do with women, as I said, over 60, I really like to think in my mind that it's creating like this new rite of passage for moving into the age of the sage, for accessing our inner wisdom. And so many of the women that do these retreats and we have the medicine, they say they feel like they've awakened this inner wisdom. So I think that's a beautiful way to sort of frame this, that these medicines, this ancient healing plant medicine that we now can access as we, all over the world start bringing these medicines back up for use. It's awakening our wisdom, all of our wisdom. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on this planet right now. And we need to bring like the best minds and wisdom and inner wisdom and ancestral wisdom and ancient wisdom. We need to bring all that to the table. So trying to save the world one psilocybin trip at a time. What can I do? What can I tell you? I work in service of the mushrooms. And I think there's a lot of beautiful wisdom that can come to us for our aging. I think there's a place, I'm talking about it for aging right now, but boy, would I love to see, therapists start doing rites of passage for people, for especially, young men have such a hard time. Young men like doing rites of passage with psilocybin as you turn 21, instead of going out and drinking 21 friggin' beers, like go into the wilderness with other men and access your wisdom with plant medicine. So I say it just because there's so many opportunities at hand for this medicine. It's so beautiful. It's so healing. It's got such a high safety profile. And so talks like this, you all that are on this call, going out, sharing information, we need to educate the consumers of this medicine, but we also need to be educating the doctors and the mental health professionals. It's an awakening of all of our understanding of all the different wonderful places that these medicines can be applied. I loved these pictures of these little old hippie people I found, but this is a Thomas More quote that kind of captures it. In the second half of life, we are summoned not to climb higher, but to go deeper. And I really feel like that's what psilocybin, when done properly, it takes us deeper. And it's important that, whenever you're working with these medicines, these trainings are out there. I don't know, hopefully we've got a Q&A, so I'll be interested to hear, but, it's so important to get the training and then have the experience with the medicine yourself so that you really are versed and have a relationship with the medicine. But then just, really holding this deep intention for the healing of the people you work with. I mean, I feel like every single client I work with, I have as much intention for their healing as they have for their healing. And there's something that's going on a bigger level there that's just really important in this work, is the intention that we bring to it, the integrity and intention that we bring to it as well. So that's a little bit of my chat for tonight. And these are 2 places that you can find me. Again, I do privates and I do retreats, and I really, I hope that this has inspired you. I hope I provided just some nuggets of information. I didn't go too deep into the science. I did a little, but I think I provided you hopefully a good overview of some of the ways that this medicine can be brought and helpful for aging, saging, and end of life. So thank you for listening.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you for that wonderful talk. Super insightful and interesting. And I would just like to now invite everyone on the call for any questions. If you have questions, please pop them in the chat, and then we can read through and pass them through and pass them up about any of Heather's work or anything that she shared. Um, there is one here from
Awesome.
Caroline, just asked and said, I'd love for you to come to Tasmania, Australia, and run with these retreats. And unfortunately, Caroline, running retreats in Australia, we're a while away from that being legal. We're not quite, our regulations are a little bit different to what's in Colorado. So we're not currently able to do retreat.
Hopefully soon, hopefully soon.
That's right. Does anyone else have any other questions? Renee, I see yours about practitioners in Perth. I'll get Alan to pop a link in the chat with some interests about it.
Yeah.
Diana's asked, what about treating children with ADHD, Heather? Have you seen any research into that?
I think there is some research going on. I don't work with anybody who's under 21 just to kind of, stay on the safe side of things legally, but there's all sorts of research going on, and I haven't seen as much on ADHD, so I really can't speak to that, but I would encourage you to, do a bit of a Google search on some of the research articles and see what you find out there. That's not an area I have a lot of information on.
Yeah, beautiful. And there's another question here, and this is maybe an area that you would. Do you know if there's been, this is a great one. Do you know if there's been any research on the role it can play in managing or helping reduce perimenopause and menopause symptoms, and then especially cognitive impacts?
Yes, lots of research going on in that area. Actually, menopause and perimenopause is a big area of research right now, and they are finding exactly that the way that it impacts some of our hormones, absolutely, and the way the hormones interplay with the serotonin receptor, there absolutely is a lot of research going on showing that psilocybin can have a very positive and beneficial effect on, enhancing the cognitive function and some other things as well in relation to some of those ways that hormones affect women's health and wellness.
Beautiful. And perhaps in addition to the discussion of research, do you have any observations you've made with the work that you've done to people, managing these difficulties?
Well, I mean, I think what I'm seeing is just really a lot of folks that are coming to me with depression and anxiety, older women. Often I have, folks are tapering those meds to come and do their psilocybin experience. And I would say a good 75 to 80% of the women who come and do the medicine work, whether that be privates or in the retreat setting, who have tapered their meds just specifically so that they can have a better impact of the psilocybin, are finding in my follow-up 6 months to a year out, as I said, 75 to 80% of those women are not needing to go back on the meds. They're finding sustained relief from that anxiety and depression, and not needing to go back on meds for anywhere up to 6 months to a year post psilocybin macro journeys.
Wow.
Which is, listen, I'll take it. And again, a lot of how I really, because I'm not a researcher, but what I really look at in my clients and what I calibrate as success is their quality of life. So what I'm getting is by self-report, people are saying that they really have such enhanced emotional wellness and just feeling, seeing shifts in, like, I work with a lot of women who've lost children. That somehow became another little side area, but it's such a rewarding place to work. And the ability to sort of really master grief in a way that can be mastered without having to utilize medication is really, really positive. I think anytime that, there's a place for pharmaceuticals, but anytime that, these natural medicines can maybe impact your need for those is a win.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'll grab another question here. This one comes from Stephen. Could you say something about your use of music during sessions and retreats? Do you have particular playlists you like to use, particular genres you prefer? Anything on the topic would be appreciated.
Yes, oh my God, that's such a beautiful new like specialty, right? Is this music for psychedelic work, and it's just so powerful and evocative and really guides the journey. So, I mean, I have a playlist. One of the playlists that I really, really love is it's just called Ketamine Gentle. It's on Spotify. It's one that I've just been using for many years, and it just I love it, so I use it a lot. And then I have a lot of colleagues who are creating beautiful, beautiful playlists, and I often use some of theirs. I would say, if you haven't seen Mushrooms, Music for Mushrooms, help me out. Who's the guy? Who's the guy? The Music for Mushrooms
East
guy.
Forest.
East Forest, thank you. I need to do my synapses. I need to do some more mushrooms. But East Forest, the documentary on East Forest called Mushrooms for Music for Mushrooms really dives into that topic well. And I think, the music, obviously the soundtrack, the music that sort of have, I think what you want to be cautious of is music that doesn't have very many lyrics. It really should be more sort of ethereal type of music. I also caution people, early on, everybody was all about the Johns Hopkins soundtrack, which has a lot of sort of Gregorian chants. And I'll tell you what, I used that a few times with people who had some like religious trauma, hadn't had some good experiences in the Catholic Church, and that Gregorian chanting stuff was sending them down a bad rabbit hole. So I think there's an element of sort of cultural awareness maybe about knowing your clients' histories to be a little sensitive to what may or may not be good for them. And that's not always easy to assess, but I think you want to find music and soundtracks that again are very though that have been designed specifically for this work. I'll just say that. And there are quite a few out there, but you really want to use soundtracks that are designed very specifically for psychedelic medicine work. Obviously, you want a soundtrack that's going to last at least 7 to 8 hours. I encourage people to listen to anything before they use it with clients in case there's something really funky in the middle that you didn't know was going to be there. So that's my little bit on music. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I will keep reading through here and pulling some more out. Elizabeth just asked, following on from Samantha's question, do you have any advice around safe use of microdosing with more frail elderly people with congestive heart failure, things such as this?
Yeah. Well, again, so anybody that I work with, I have a medical screener who really does a pretty good deep dive with all of my clients. So I send my clients, they pay $200 and they get a really good medical screening. I'm a mental health professional. I'm not a medical doctor professional. So that gives me this other level of feeling comfortable with what I'm doing with my clients. And to that point, yes, when you're working with people who are medically compromised or frail elders, you want to really make sure that you're checking those things, like what other meds are they on? Is there any contraindication? How might this impact that medication? Cautious of blood pressure. But with microdosing, the risk is really, really minimal. I think the bigger risk is that often older folks are on so many different medications, and those could really just sort of wipe out any of the benefits of microdosing. But I would just say to, if you're going to be working with somebody who you think anybody that you're going to work with prescribing any kind of psilocybin, whether that macro or micro, your best bet as a mental health professional is to make sure that you have a medical person who does that screening and signs off.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Heather. And I do see there's a few other questions in here that are sort of a similar bent around some of these screening things. And it is sort of, some of these are probably almost best for people to have a conversation with a medical professional and around it in a more
Yeah.
private setting rather than here, because otherwise it is often a bit of a case by case type thing too. One here from Steve, which is, what are your thoughts on the necessity for longer term integration over the after the session beyond the usual post therapy post dosing therapy sessions?
Yeah, I'm so glad that somebody brought that up because I did want to mention that. I think that's an area we really need to pay more attention to as this field emerges, because I think, because that is really when the rich work begins, is on the flip side and with the integration. And So sometimes you might work with somebody who's got a therapist who really understands integration therapy, and they can come and perhaps do the medicine, and then you can pass them back to their therapist to work with on the material that came up. But I think, what I just recently started doing, and it's just going like gangbusters because everybody was so hungry for it, is anybody that I've worked with, I've now created an online community that I'm calling the Conscious Conversation Collection. And so I'm just inviting anyone who's ever done any work with me to be part of an online group that meets once a month, so that all of these women, who many of them have never met each other, they're from all different places around the country, but they're so hungry to be in community with other women or other people who have had the medicine experience, so they continue to do that integration, supporting each other. So I think there are different sort of models that we can create for how extended integration looks, and I don't know that that always needs to be with the, in a one-on-one therapy with the person that you did that. I think it can be in these containers that are peer support groups, or that are led by a facilitator of a group of folks who have done medicine. I think we need to create more models for that, because I think there is definitely a need for people to stay connected to doing that work. It's so important. It's a big psycho-spiritual journey when you do this medicine, and it's important to really honor that information and work with it, and really lay down these new neural pathways by really doing the work to ingrain those new patterns of thought, behavior, belief. So I think there's opportunity there, whether the person who asked the question, I don't know what their role is, but I think there's opportunity in all sorts of ways for us to be looking at how to create extended containers for integration. I know I have some colleagues who are not interested in getting into doing psychedelic medicine work, but they're getting skilled in doing the integration piece. So I have folks that I often pass clients off to just do integration with therapists that just specialize in integration. So I think there's lots of opportunities as this field grows for that piece to be explored and expanded.
Thanks, Heather. What you just said resonates really, really strongly with me as well. I feel like the community side of long-term integration is such an important element of it, as you said, because I do feel like it's almost something that we sort of seen. It's like if you go through this huge journey, but then you're not connected to a community that can understand it, then there's
Yes,
new difficulties that can come up. And so that's an amazing offering that you're putting forward for yours. And this is something that we've also thought about, and we run community events and things like this a little bit as well. And we think that this is a huge part of this space to create that like integration in community, as well as potentially with the therapists or ongoing therapists and with different modalities. But I think it's so central.
absolutely. And if you build it, they will come, guarantee you.
Mhm. Mhm. Beautiful. Now, I think we've grabbed most of the questions that were in the chat. Does anyone else have any others that they'd like to throw in? I'm not sure, Alana, if you have any questions, or Heather, if you have any other particular areas that you really want to speak to in the last sort of few minutes that we have here.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to give it just another little shout out to the piece for the palliative care, because I know you all have an active initiative going in that. And I really would just like to encourage people to, get online, and you have I think you put a link, right, for being part of
Yeah,
that.
I'll paste the link again.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
Alana.
because that's such important work. And also for, anybody who's on here that is considering doing the training. I mean, Mind Medicine Australia really has assembled some of the like preeminent thinkers and movers in this space, and it is really an incredible program. And so I encourage anybody who's thinking of going into the field to look at that, because hats off to you all, because you really have gathered the best of the best. And this is a beautiful time to be getting into this space, because it's growing, and we need really good people in this space. And it's so rewarding, because everybody that we heal, we're all healing together, right? And like I said, the planet needs this healing now more than ever. So we need to all be working in service of the mushrooms. They're good. It's good. It's a good thing to work for. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Heather.
Thank
Now,
you so much. That's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah, beautiful. I've seen one question that was reshared, so I'll pass this one to you, and then I have one from me, and perhaps we'll take these as last two questions before we wrap the session up. The first one, I know this potentially isn't your area so much, but what do you think of is ayahuasca okay for 70-year-olds? Is this something where you
I'd say
feel
it depends on the 70-year-old.
probably want to speak to with an ayahuasca?
Yeah,
Um, and then as the last question I have for you, Heather, I would just love to hear a little bit about what's it been like for you how has it changed your professional life as you've gone from how you were working previously to working with the mushrooms? And what's that been like? I always think I love this question for practitioners in this space. What's
yeah.
that journey been like and how has it changed your I guess working life?
Oh, completely changed. So, as I said, I've been a therapist for over 30 years. And even when I very, very first got trained and started to, work in the mental health field, I immediately knew that it was not about anything that I was doing or saying, that it was about helping people access their own inner wisdom. I mean, I knew that from the get-go. And so I've always been very interested in non-ordinary states of consciousness. So dream work, shamanic journey work, guided meditation, breath work, all those sort of more mystical, non-ordinary states of consciousness type of work to help people access their inner wisdom has always been my jam. So in the early 80s, when I had my first psilocybin experience, as a college kid, where many of us maybe did, I right away knew that this was something that connected us to something more spiritual, that this was like psycho-spiritual in nature. And so, quick funny tale so I came to school out here in Colorado back in the 80s, had my first mushroom experience, and immediately it was like, oh my God, this is like psycho-spiritual. This connects us to nature. This connects us to, these spirits that are out in nature. And it became a thing that people would say, oh, have you done mushrooms with Heather? Because if you haven't done mushrooms with Heather, you got to go do mushrooms with Heather. Because I would have a backpack with like journals and art supplies and magnifying glasses. And I was taking up people out for these little field trips doing like nature immersion and journaling and arts experiences. And flash forward, here I'm now like in my 60s, a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, go figure. But what it's changed is that I'm not really the lead therapist anymore. The mushrooms are. My job is to create these really safe and soulful settings where people, it's so important that there's this feeling of trust and connection with whoever your therapist is. So creating a really genuine, authentic connection and container for people to do this medicine, knowing that they'll be supported. That's my job, is to create the really safe container for them and to have the skills to support them and to help integrate the material. But the mushrooms are the teacher. The mushrooms are what bring up, and their own inner wisdom is what comes up. So I now work, I say it and I sound like a total hippie, but that's okay. But it's really how I feel. I work in service of the mushrooms. They are the teachers, and I work in service of creating the environment that supports people in doing that deep dive into their souls and their inner wisdom. And then I work and support them with that. That's how I feel about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
That's so beautifully put. I think that's a wonderful note to finish our session on. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Heather, for sharing your wisdom with us and spending this time with us today. It's such a pleasure to have you there. And as one final shout out, if anyone does have a spare 5 minutes, make it that submission for this end of life campaign and try and support it, because it's such a meaningful thing if we can support this to start happening in Australia. So thank you all for being with us. And next month we're back again. So I look forward to seeing everybody again
And
soon.
anyone, please reach out if anyone wants to connect with me individually. I'm always happy to answer more questions or just be a resource. I'm here.
Thank
Heather,
you.
is it okay if we send your email as part of our thank you note after the session?
Absolutely. Yes, please. Please
I'll
do. Thank
include
you
that.
all for coming. I really appreciate you attending.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.